Hi, John here with Tigerseal, and today we want to talk about how to replace the cutting shears in your 555E Better Pack water activated tape dispenser, and other problems you might have once you get into the shears, problems you might have and issues inside the tape machine, how to clean it and oil it once you get into where the shears are located. So to begin with, you want to unplug your machine. You want to remove both the water bottle and the water tank. And you want to remove both the key drum and the motor cover. And if you've watched our other videos, I sound like a broken tape recorder here. There's five screws, and we've already removed 4 to save time. When you remove the 5th screw, before you do, hold the key drum cover up. Don't let it flop open. If you do, you'll wind up breaking the information cable. So hold it up while you remove the last screw. Then you want to take the information cable, the 2 cables coming off of the membrane switch, unplug the on-off switch from the control board, set your cover aside, your key drum cover, then go over and take the other cover off. And again, 5 screws, we've removed 4. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the last screw. This one, there's nothing connected, so you just can take it off. It doesn't matter if it flops open. So now we've got the 2 covers off. And in order to get into the shear kit, we have to remove the top heater and that safety baffle plate right here. So first we'll remove the top heater. The reason we have to remove the top heater is because the lower shear has to come up and out of the machine. The only way it can come up and out is if you remove the top heater. So we're going to remove that. I'm going to take out don't lose the little shear rollers here, one on each side of the heater. And don't lose your pivot rod. Now we have to remove this safety baffle plate. To do that, there'll be a screw on each side, a Phillips head screw. One is here, 10/24 screw. And we're going to remove that screw. On the other side, we're going to remove the same screw. It's located right here. Remove that screw. And just to make a mention, on a very few machines, there'll be a 3rd screw located right about here that holds the safety baffle plate in. That screw is no longer used. It was only used for a short period of time, but if you have a 3rd screw, you can remove it and throw that one away. It's of no value. So now we can remove the safety baffle plate, and we also have to remove the tank support shelf. And the tank support shelf is this piece of plastic right here that supports the water tank. And to get that out, we're going to use a flathead screwdriver and just pry it out. It has little tabs on each side. It'll take just a second here to pop it out. And then it should normally just pull right off. But this one's a little stiff. But anyway, those are the tabs. You got to pop those tabs off to get the tank support shelf out. Now we have access to the parts inside the machine and the shear. You have an upper shear and a lower shear. And when you're replacing the shears, we do recommend replacing, we sell them as a kit, and we do recommend replacing both the upper and lower shears at the same time, since you've already gone through all the effort to take the machine apart. The shear kit comes with the upper shear, the lower shear with the 2 shear springs already, and a new shear rod. So you have the complete kit. So to get, take off the upper tape plate. To get the shear out, the upper shear, there's a nut sometimes on this side, sometimes there isn't, depending on the year of production. Your screw goes through this hole in the frame, and then you simply unscrew, hold the nut. You might have to break the tension on the nut loose if it's on there real hard. This one is not. So we can just unscrew the shear rod. What we're doing is we're going to take the shear rod here. I take the nut off, don't want to lose it. Well, you get an extra nut with the kit. So if you lose it, it's no big deal. And then we're going to take the shear rod out, and that allows us to remove the upper shear. Now the lower shear is held in by two springs, one on each side that clip down inside the machine. The only way that I find to get those off is to remove the solenoid shelf itself. So I'm going to pop, this is the main shear spring, and I'm going to pop this off. And now we have to remove 4 screws. 2 on this side of the solenoid shelf, and 2, should have taken the heater off, I was lazy, and 2 on this side. So we're going to remove all 4 screws. That'll allow us to drop the solenoid shelf down. And the other reason for dropping the solenoid shelf down, it'll allow us to get inside the machine and take a look at some of the components inside the machine, okay? So I've gone ahead and removed these 4 10/24 Phillips head screws from the solenoid shelf. Now, this is a newer machine, so the solenoid shelf, you can lift it up and out. I'm going to show you that here in a second. Just notice how easy this was to take out. And that's your solenoid shelf. Now, on older machines, the solenoid shelf will have 2 wings coming off the side, and they snap into these little grooves right here. So if you have an older machine, in order to get the solenoid shelf out, you're going to have to pry the shelf out to get the wings to come out. So that's on older machines, and most of the machines have those. Again, this is a newer machine. Now, the lower shear is held in, as I mentioned, by 2 springs. Here's one, here's the other on each frame. You pop those, and the shear lifts up and out, which is why we had to take the top heater off to get the shear up and out. Before we install the new shear kit, though, I want to talk about a couple of issues that you can have inside the machine and how to resolve them. We talked in another video about short tape lengths and replacing the upper feed wheel. Sometimes, though, the upper feed wheel is not the cause of short tape lengths. What can happen is that the lower feed wheel, the bearings in here can seize up, and the lower feed wheel doesn't spin free. So no matter how much you try to adjust, you're still getting short tape lengths. One of the things you want to do when you're replacing your shears is check that lower feed wheel and make sure it's spinning free. If the lower feed wheel isn't spinning free, and on every machine we service, and whenever you replace the shear kit, it doesn't hurt to take some light machine oil and simply soak the bearings with light machine oil. Get them well lubricated so that the wheel continues to spin free. So anytime you replace a shear kit, think about oiling the lower feed wheel. The other area that you want to clean out and oil is the solenoid and the plunger. We've already cleaned this and oiled it. The reason you want to do that is sometimes solenoids can chatter when they get a buildup of glue and water and dust. So you'll press a button on your machine, you hear a grumbling sound from deep inside the machine. And that's merely the solenoid not being able to pull the shear up when it's energized. The way to avoid that problem is to put some light machine oil on the solenoid plunger when you're replacing your shear kit. And again, just using a little bit of light machine oil, drizzle it on, not too much, rub it around, and then reinstall the solenoid after you've oiled the solenoid's plunger. Okay, now let's go ahead and reinstall the shear kit. This shear kit's fine, so we're not putting a new shear kit in it. So to install it, you want to drop the lower shear in first, and it sits in a cradle right here on these 2 L-clips. Then you want to pull the springs down and clip them back onto the posts inside the frame there, one on each side, just like that. So the lower shear is in, and that's good. We want to reinstall our upper shear. Again, put the shear in the yoke assembly. Oops. Okay. Slide it through, and we're going to screw it through the yoke. And we're going to talk about the yoke assembly just a bit too. And then you take the nut, which I Didn't lose this time, I usually do. Put it on this side and hold it, start to screw it in. And then I use a pair of needle nose pliers to hold the nut. And screw it in. So replacing the shears is rather simple, except for the fact that you do have to remove the top heater and you do have to remove the safety baffle plate. And I find it easier to drop the solenoid shelf down in order to get those springs hooked in. Because if the solenoid shelf is there, it can block you from reconnecting those springs. But the other thing is, when you drop the solenoid shelf, it's good to do that so you can clean the plunger. Now, to reinstall the solenoid shelf, this one again is a newer machine, doesn't have the wings on the side. So all I have to do is basically get it up there, grab the plunger, put it in the solenoid, and this is awkward to do from an angle. So I've got the plunger in, and then I have to reinstall the 4 screws into the solenoid plate shelf. Make sure you do reinstall those 4 screws or it just won't work. The machine won't work. So make sure you do that. Line it up. Now I wanted to talk ever so briefly too about the cutter yoke assembly, because that can also cause some tape length problems. This is a new assembly. And you'll notice there's no play in the shaft right here that connects to the plunger. Older assemblies this is an older solenoid assembly, and I want to show you this. It's starting to get play because it's an older assembly, starting to wear right here. And when that wears, it can wear to the point where all of a sudden, no matter how you adjust the lower feed wheel, you still get short tape lengths because of this wear. So if you notice a lot of wear, and this is not excessive, but if you notice an excessive amount of wear, then you might have to replace the cutter yoke assembly. And the other thing that can happen with both the cutter yoke and the lower feed wheel assembly, we've seen from time to time, is these shafts can break. And that will cause the yoke assembly or the lower feed wheel to drop down inside the machine. So when you look inside your machine, it'll be obvious. If this cutter yoke assembly is sitting on an angle, or the lower feed wheel shaft is sitting on an angle, it's not perfectly straight across, you might have a broken shaft on your cutter yoke assembly, and you'll need to replace it. To do that, you really have to spread the machine apart, and that'll be for another video. That'll be quite a lengthy video to explain how to spread the frames apart. So basically, we're done with this machine. We have to put the screws back in. Don't forget to reconnect your shear spring to the cutter yoke assembly before you button everything up, okay? Okay, so I put the 4 screws back into our solenoid shelf. Make sure they're real tight. We don't want them loosening up. I'm going to reconnect the shear spring, and that connects from the solenoid shelf to the cutter yoke, so the spring will go up and down. Don't forget to do that. I've done that several times. I have to go back in and take the safety baffle plate out again. Don't forget to reinstall your safety baffle plate. And again, it just drops in, and the screw on each side. Now, one last thing before we leave this whole shebang here. There is one other screw that can sometimes come out of adjustment and can cause you to get a bad tape cut. So anytime you replace the shears, or if you're getting a bad tape cut, check this screw right here. This screw controls the angle of the lower shear. It's in a little groove and it can slide up and down. So check to make sure this screw is in the up position, and then tighten as hard as you can. You want that screw in the up position to make sure that the angle of the lower blade against the upper blade is correct. So just check that screw before you put everything back together again, and that'll make sure that your angle of your lower shear is in the correct position. Well, that's about it for replacing the shear. Don't forget to put your heater back on. If you have any questions, you can call us at 800-899-9389. All of the parts are on our website, which is tigerseal.com or tigersealproducts.com. We have good diagrams on there, parts prices and everything. And thank you for watching our video.